The first sound I heard was my wife whispering my name like she was afraid someone else would hear it. I was standing on a ladder under our front porch, one hand inside the busted light fixture, the other holding a screwdriver that smelled like dust and old metal. Rain had just moved through Cedar Hollow, leaving the boards damp, the air heavy with wet pine, and the driveway shining under the last gray light of evening. My phone vibrated against the toolbox on the porch rail. Marissa's name flashed across the screen, and that should not have worried me because she was only supposed to be turning into our street after a 12-hour shift at St. Agnes Medical. She called me all the time from the car, usually to ask if I wanted coffee, or to tell me which patient made her laugh that day, or just to hear a normal voice before she came home. But when I answered, there was no hello. There was only her breathing, thin and careful, and then her voice. "Ethan, there are 3 men blocking the driveway." I stepped down from the ladder so fast the porch boards groaned under my boots. "Where are you?" "At the entrance to our drive," she whispered. "They say they are Cedar Hollow compliance officers. They want me to get out and hand over my keys." For 1 second, the whole world narrowed to the rain ticking from the gutters and the tiny electrical buzz from the porch light hanging open above me. Our driveway was not public. It ran 180 feet from the street to our porch, bordered by 2 maples, a split-rail fence, and the little patch of black-eyed Susans Marissa planted the spring we moved in. Nobody had authority to block it. Nobody had authority to stop my wife there. In the background, I heard a man's voice, louder than hers, polished and fake. "Ma'am, refusal to comply will be noted as hostile conduct." Then another voice said, "Your husband is not here to protect you." My fingers closed around the screwdriver, then opened again. That part mattered. People think training makes you react faster, and it does, but the best training teaches you to choose what not to do. I set the screwdriver down on the porch rail. I took 1 breath, then another. "Keep the call open," I told her. "Do not argue. Do not step out unless real law enforcement tells you to." Marissa's hospital keychain jingled faintly through the phone, that little blue plastic tag with the scratched white cross she had carried for years. I could picture it hanging from her ignition, swinging above her work bag, beside the badge she used to enter rooms where people were scared and hurting and trusted her to stay calm. Now some strangers in black polos and plastic badges were standing in front of her car, pretending a homeowners association could turn them into police. I moved through the garage, past the workbench, the folded flag in its wooden case, and the old patch tucked under a tray of screws, the one with a single word stitched in faded thread, Echo. I had not worn that name in years. I did not put it on display. I did not talk about where it came from unless someone had earned the truth. Cedar Hollow knew me as the quiet guy who fixed his own gutters, ran before sunrise, and waved to neighbors without stopping for gossip. That was how I liked it. But as I stepped into the wet driveway and saw Marissa's taillights glowing red through the trees, I understood something cold and simple. Those men had not just come for a violation. They had come because someone told them she would be alone. I moved down the driveway without running, because running tells people they control the clock. The wet gravel pressed under my boots. Each step steady, each breath counted. Through the maples, I could see Marissa's gray sedan stopped at an angle just inside our property line, headlights shining across the split-rail fence and catching 3 figures in black polo shirts. Their shirts had the Cedar Hollow crest printed over the chest, but the badges clipped to their belts were too shiny, too large, and too cheap. Plastic authority always looks brightest when it is trying to pass for metal. One of them stood near the driver's window with a tablet. Another blocked the front of the car with his hands on his belt. The third was near the passenger side, leaning close enough to make the whole scene feel wrong from 30 yards away. Marissa still had the phone open. I could hear her breathing through my own speaker and see her silhouette behind the glass, shoulders tight, one hand near the steering wheel, the other holding her work bag against her lap. That was my wife after 12 hours of taking vitals, writing charts, calming families, and walking hospital halls under fluorescent lights. She should have been pulling into the garage, dropping her shoes by the laundry room, and letting the house carry the weight off her. Instead, she was trapped in the last stretch of our own driveway by men who had mistaken a homeowners association logo for a badge. Cedar Hollow had not always been like that. When we bought the house, it was quiet in the way older neighborhoods are quiet, with mailboxes that leaned a little, children riding bikes in the cul-de-sac, and neighbors who waved with one hand while holding garden hoses in the other. Then Darlene Whitaker became Homeowners Association president. She called herself a protector of standards, but what she protected was control. First came the warning letters about trash cans visible from the street. Then the driveway inspections. Then the community hotline. Then the black polos, the plastic badges, and the new phrase she loved to repeat in newsletters, compliance response team. It sounded official enough to scare elderly residents, new homeowners, and people too busy working double shifts to read bylaws at midnight. Marissa had laughed the first time she saw them patrolling in a golf cart, but she stopped laughing when Mrs. Alvarez down the block received a $200 fine because her visiting son parked overnight without pre-approval. I had told Marissa then that fake authority grows in the space where tired people decide it is easier to pay than fight. I just never thought Darlene would send that space to my driveway. As I got closer, I saw the small blue hospital keychain hanging from Marissa's ignition, swinging gently in the beam of the dashboard light. That little piece of plastic pulled something tight inside my chest. It was ordinary. That was what made it sacred. Grocery lists, night shifts, coffee runs, house keys, life before strangers started using words like hostile conduct at the woman who had spent all day helping people breathe easier. The man at her window turned when he heard my boots on gravel. He was broad, clean-shaven, and carried himself with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed before being questioned. "Sir, stay back," he said. "This is an active compliance stop." I stopped 10 feet away, where the headlights lit my jacket and his plastic badge caught the rain. "There is no such thing as a compliance stop on my private driveway," I said. "Step away from my wife's car." He smiled like he had been waiting to perform. "Your wife refused a lawful inspection." Marissa's voice came through the cracked window, steady but thin. "I asked them to call real police." The man tapped his badge with 2 fingers. "We represent Cedar Hollow Enforcement." I looked at the badge, then at the tablet, then at the security camera light blinking on Noah Briggs's porch across the street. "No," I said. "You represent someone who lied to you." The man with the tablet said his name was Glenn Porter, and he said it the way people say a title when the title has not been earned. He told me he was the lead officer for Cedar Hollow Compliance, then angled his badge toward the headlights so it could catch the shine. I looked at the word officer printed beneath the plastic seal, then at the rainwater running down his sleeve, then at the 2 men behind him who suddenly seemed less sure now that there was another witness standing in the driveway. "Who certified you?" I asked. Glenn blinked. "We are authorized by the association." That was not my question. The man near Marissa's passenger door shifted his weight and tried to look bored, but his eyes kept sliding toward Noah Briggs's porch across the street, where the doorbell camera glowed blue under the eave. Good. Cameras make liars remember grammar. Marissa lowered her window 1 more inch, just enough for her voice to carry. "They told me my car was flagged. They asked for my work bag and my keys." Glenn turned sharply toward her. "Ma'am, you were instructed not to interrupt." That sentence changed the temperature of the driveway. Not because he shouted. He did not. He used a calm voice, the kind cowards borrow from customer service manuals when they want disrespect to sound procedural. I took 1 step closer, still outside arm's reach, still visible to every camera, still breathing evenly. "You do not instruct my wife on our property." Glenn looked back at me and smiled again, but now it had a crack in it. "Mr. Walker, failure to cooperate may result in escalation." "Escalation to who?" I asked. "The real police?" Behind the windshield, I saw Marissa's hand move toward her phone. The 3rd man noticed too. He leaned toward the open passenger window and said, "Put that away." Marissa pulled the phone back, and her hospital keychain slipped from her fingers, bounced once against the center console, and fell onto the wet asphalt where her driver's door met the driveway. The little blue tag landed face up in the headlight beam, scratched white cross shining under rain. It was such a small sound, plastic against pavement, but I heard it like a bell. My mind did what it had been trained to do years before, not in anger, but in sequence. Distance. Hands. Exits. Witnesses. Threat level. Marissa was seated, belted, tired, boxed in by 3 people with no legal authority. Glenn was posturing. The passenger side man was testing boundaries. The 3rd was blocking the front of the car. None of that required panic. It required control. "Marissa," I said, I still on Glenn. "Keep both hands visible and do not reach for anything else." She answered, "Okay." And that one word carried 12 hours of exhaustion and trust. Glenn gave a short laugh. "You military guys always talk like you are still in charge of something." I had not told him I was military. I had not said a word about service, deployments, training, or the old echo patch sitting under screws in my garage. So when he said that, I knew Darlene had briefed them. Not just about my address. About me. About my wife's schedule. About when she would be coming home. That was the moment this stopped being a fake compliance stop and became a planned intimidation attempt. I pointed toward the street with 2 fingers. "Move your people off my driveway. Now." Glenn's smile disappeared. "Or what?" From behind him came the soft whir of Noah's door opening across the street. Then his voice calling through the damp evening air. "Ethan, my camera has the whole thing." Glenn turned toward the sound, and I used that second to move to Marissa's side of the car, not touching him, not crowding him, just changing the geometry so the 3 of them were no longer between my wife and our front porch. Glenn looked back at me, suddenly irritated that the scene was no longer arranged in his favor. "You think a doorbell video changes HOA authority?" he asked. I looked down at Marissa's blue keychain on the asphalt, then at his plastic badge. "No," I said. "It proves you never had any." Noah Briggs stood on his porch in a rain jacket, holding his phone like a flashlight, and the little blue glow from his doorbell camera made Glenn Porter look suddenly less official. That was the strange thing about fake power. It filled a space until real witnesses stepped into it. Glenn glanced at Noah, then back at me, then toward the 2 men in black polos as if he expected the scene to rearrange itself around his confidence. It did not. Marissa's sedan idled softly between us, windshield wipers clicking once every few seconds, her hospital parking sticker visible in the corner of the glass. She had spent the entire day helping people who had real emergencies, and now 3 grown men with plastic badges were trying to turn her driveway into a checkpoint. "Mr. Walker," Glenn said, lowering his voice, "you are interfering with an authorized homeowners association compliance action." "No," I said. "I am standing on my own driveway while my wife waits for real law enforcement." The man near the passenger side looked at Glenn. "Should we call Darlene?" That name landed exactly where I expected it to. Darlene Whitaker had a way of entering every neighborhood problem before anyone invited her. Her newsletters called Cedar Hollow a community built on safety, appearance, and shared responsibility. But her version of safety always seemed to require someone else being watched, corrected, fined, or embarrassed in public. I kept my eyes on Glenn. "You already called her before you came here, did you?" "Not." His silence answered faster than words. Then headlights appeared at the end of the street. Not police lights, just the soft electric hum of a golf cart coming around the curve. Darlene arrived under a clear plastic rain canopy, sitting upright in a beige cardigan with a Cedar Hollow pin near her collar, silver hair tucked under a visor as if she were attending a garden tour instead of a trespass complaint. She parked beside Noah's mailbox and stepped out carefully, carrying a folder and the same calm smile she wore in every board meeting photo. "Ethan," she said, as if we were discussing mailbox paint. "This could have been handled civilly." Marissa's voice came from inside the car, stronger now. "I asked them to call the police, and they told me to surrender my keys." Darlene did not even look at her. That was the part one never forgot. My wife was 10 feet away, still in scrubs, still tired, still trapped behind a blocked driveway. And Darlene looked only at me, because control always searches for the person it thinks it has to defeat. "Your household has been resistant to basic community protocols," Darlene said. "The team was sent to verify compliance after repeated concerns." "What concerns?" I asked. She opened the folder, but her fingers paused before pulling anything out. "Parking irregularities. Unauthorized overnight vehicle access. Failure to cooperate with neighborhood security." Noah called from his porch. "Marissa lives there, Darlene." A porch light flicked on across the street. Then another. Cedar Hollow was waking up window by window. The man in front of Marissa's car stepped aside half a pace. Not enough to clear the driveway, but enough to show doubt. Glenn noticed and snapped, "Hold position." That was when Marissa opened her door slowly. I moved one step closer to the hinged side, creating space without touching anyone. Her shoes touched the wet asphalt, and the blue hospital keychain lay beside her foot. She picked it up with trembling fingers, then stood beside me. I did not put an arm around her because I wanted every camera to see both of her hands free and every one of their hands empty. Darlene's smile thinned. This is becoming unnecessary. I looked at the plastic badges, the blocked car, Noah's camera, Marissa's keychain, and the broken porch light glowing uselessly behind us. No, I said. This is becoming documented. The red and blue lights reached our street before anyone found the courage to leave. They came soft at first, washing over wet mailboxes and maple trunks, then brighter as a county cruiser turned into Cedar Hollow and rolled toward our driveway. Deputy Marcus Reed stepped out with his rain jacket half zipped, one hand resting near his belt and the other lifting in that calm, open way real authority uses when it does not need to perform. His body camera blinked against his chest. Darlene saw it and immediately changed her posture. Her shoulders dropped, her smile warmed, and the folder in her hands became a prop for innocence. Deputy, she called, thank you for coming. This is a homeowners association compliance matter that became unnecessarily tense. I almost admired how fast she tried to put a frame around the story. Almost. Deputy Reed looked at Marissa first, not Darlene, not me, not the men in black polos. Ma'am, are you safe where you are standing? Marissa nodded, but her hand closed tighter around the blue hospital keychain. I am safe now, she said. They blocked my car and demanded my keys. The word now hung in the damp air. Reed wrote something in his small notebook, then turned to Glenn. Who are you employed by? Glenn straightened. Cedar Hollow Compliance Response Team. Are you law enforcement? We are authorized by the Homeowners Association. Deputy Reed looked up slowly. That was not the question. I heard Noah exhale from his porch. A few more neighbors had gathered under umbrellas along the street, quiet but watching. Porch lights glowed through the mist, and every fake badge seemed smaller under them. Darlene stepped forward. Deputy, our governing documents allow reasonable enforcement actions for community safety. Reed held up one hand without looking away from Glenn. Did you stop this vehicle from entering a private driveway? Glenn hesitated. We initiated a compliance check. Did you ask for her keys? We requested cooperation. Did you identify yourselves as officers? The man near the front of Marissa's car looked down at his shoes. Glenn's jaw tightened. Our badges say compliance officers. Deputy Reed wrote again. Noted. Darlene's smile twitched, and that was when she made her first real mistake on camera. The Walkers have been difficult for months. Mr. Walker has a military background, and we believed a structured approach was necessary. The street went still around that sentence. I looked at her, and for the first time that night, I let the quiet stretch long enough for everyone else to understand it. She had just admitted this was not a random stop. She had selected my wife, my driveway, and my history, then sent plastic authority to make a point. Deputy Reed turned his body slightly toward her. You sent 3 private individuals to confront a resident because of her husband's background. That is not what I meant. Then explain what you meant. Darlene opened her folder, closed it again, and found nothing inside that could save the sentence. Glenn tried to speak over her. Deputy, he approached us aggressively. Noah lifted his phone. I already sent the doorbell video to the department email. He walked down calm. You blocked the car. Reed glanced at me. Mr. Walker, did you touch anyone? No, sir, I said. I moved to create space for my wife and waited for you. Marissa added. He told me to keep my hands visible and not escalate. That seemed to matter to Reed. His eyes moved from my open hands to the broken porch light behind me, then to the old echo patch barely visible in the garage toolbox where the overhead light spilled across the workbench. He did not ask about it. He did not need to. Glenn did. What is echo? He muttered, trying to sound dismissive, but his voice had lost its shine. I looked at Marissa, at the keychain in her hand, at the fake badges lined up under real lights, and answered with the only word I needed. Discipline. Deputy Reed did not smile when I said it. He only nodded once, the way a man nods when an answer gives him enough and not too much. Then he separated everyone without raising his voice. Marissa stood beside the cruiser. Under the edge of the maple tree, wrapped in the emergency blanket Reed pulled from his trunk because her scrubs were damp from the rain and her hands had started shaking after the danger passed. I stayed near the porch steps, visible, quiet, with my palms open and my shoulders loose. Glenn and his 2 men were told to stand by the split-rail fence, away from Marissa's car. Darlene tried to stand with them like she was supervising the process, but Deputy Reed told her, "Ma'am, you are part of the complaint, not part of the response." That sentence moved through the street like a porch light turning on. For years, Darlene had inserted herself into everything: trash cans, parking, holiday decorations, mailbox numbers, lawn height, visitor passes, even the color of mulch people used around their own trees. She had trained Cedar Hollow to mistake her presence for authority. Now a real deputy had placed her exactly where she belonged, inside the facts, not above them. Reed asked for identification from the three men in black polos. Glenn handed over a driver license and a business card that said Cedar Hollow Compliance Response Team, Lead Field Officer. Reed looked at the card for half a second. "This is not a license." Glenn cleared his throat. "The association created the role under its safety initiative. Do you have state certification, law enforcement credentials, private security registration, or written authorization from a court?" Glenn looked toward Darlene. She looked toward her folder. The rain kept dripping from the maple leaves, steady and patient. "We have board approval," she said. Reed wrote it down. "Board approval is not police authority." "No," across the street then, careful on the wet asphalt, and handed Reed his phone. The doorbell footage played with the tinny sound of rain in the background. We watched Glenn step in front of Marissa's car. We watched the passenger side man lean toward her window. We heard Marissa say, clear as glass, "Call real police." We heard one of them tell her refusal would be hostile conduct. Then the video showed me walking down the driveway slowly, empty-handed, stopping 10 feet away, telling them to step back. There was no rush, no threat, no wild movement for them to hide behind. Just a quiet driveway, a tired nurse, 3 fake badges, and a lie losing shape under a camera lens. Darlene tried to interrupt twice. Reed stopped her both times. "You will have your chance to make a statement." By then, more neighbors had gathered near the curb. Mrs. Alvarez stood under a yellow umbrella, her face tight with recognition. Behind her was Kevin Miller from the corner house, who had once paid a late-night parking fine because one of Darlene's teams photographed his brother's truck at midnight. One by one, I saw the same look settle on people. They were not watching my problem anymore. They were realizing it had been theirs too. Reed asked Marissa to explain what happened from the beginning. She did not dramatize it. That was not her way. She said she came home after her shift. 3 men blocked the drive. They claimed her car had been flagged. They demanded her keys and work bag. And when she asked for real law enforcement, they told her she was refusing compliance. Her voice shook once when she described the man near the passenger side reaching toward the phone, but she steadied herself before I could say anything. "I kept the call open because I wanted my husband to hear what was happening," she said. Reed nodded and wrote every word. Then he turned to Darlene. "Who directed this team to this address tonight?" Darlene looked down at her folder like the answer might change if she read it slowly enough. "The board authorized enhanced compliance checks." "That is not an answer." She swallowed. "It was small, but everyone saw it. I sent them." The porch light above my front door flickered once behind me, weak and broken, throwing a thin yellow pulse over the driveway. I remembered standing on the ladder 20 minutes earlier, thinking the only thing wrong with that evening was a loose wire. Now Darlene had just placed herself on the record. Reed closed his notebook. "Then we are going to discuss why a private homeowners association sent unlicensed personnel to stop a resident on private property and demand personal items." Glenn's plastic badge hung crooked in the rain. Darlene's folder sagged in her hands. Marissa's blue keychain caught the cruiser lights and flashed against her palm. For the first time since Cedar Hollow started calling fear a protocol, the real questions were finally being asked by someone she could not find. Deputy Reed moved the conversation from the driveway to the curb, and that small change did more damage to Darlene than any argument I could have made. On my property, she had tried to act like a supervisor. Under the streetlight, with a county cruiser behind her and neighbors watching from wet sidewalks, she became what she really was: a homeowners association president explaining why she had sent unlicensed men to stop a nurse on private land after dark. Reed asked Glenn and his 2 men to remove the plastic badges and place them on the hood of the cruiser. The sound they made against the metal was light, cheap, and final. One badge slid a few inches in the rain and stopped near the edge of the hood, the word officer shining up beneath the cruiser lights like a lie that had forgotten how to stand. Glenn tried one last time to save it. "Deputy, we were instructed to maintain order." Reed looked at him. Order is not a legal authority. Darlene stepped forward with her folder open, voice polished again, but thinner than before. Our attorney reviewed the program. Reed held out his hand. Then provide the written policy. She did, and Bethany had once taught me that official paper has a smell when it is fresh from panic. Warm printer ink, rushed toner, no fingerprints from history. Read the first page, then the second. His face did not change. This document authorizes parking documentation and notice delivery, he said. It does not authorize stopping vehicles, demanding keys, inspecting bags, or blocking private driveways. Marissa stood beside me now, wrapped in the blanket, her blue hospital keychain looped around one finger. She looked tired in a way sleep would not fix quickly, but when Reed asked whether she wanted to add anything, she stepped forward. I want it on record that I told them to call real police. I want it on record that I never gave consent for an inspection. I want it on record that I was coming home from work. Her voice was steady by the end, and I felt proud in a way that hurt behind my ribs. Darlene looked away from her again, and that told the neighbors more than any confession. Mrs. Alvarez came forward next, then Kevin Miller, then a young couple from Sycamore Court. They did not shout. They told Deputy Reed about late-night parking fees, fake inspection notices, cash processing charges, driveway photos, and warnings signed by the compliance response team. The pattern unfolded under the streetlight, one ordinary story at a time, and every one of those stories pointed back to Darlene's office at the clubhouse. Noah sent the doorbell footage directly to Reed, then showed a second clip from 2 weeks earlier. The same black polo shirt standing outside Mrs. Alvarez's house, writing a notice while she asked what law they were enforcing. Glenn watched the video with his jaw locked, but the confidence had drained out of him. Then Captain Laura Bennett arrived in an unmarked sedan, her badge real enough that nobody had to squint at it. Reed briefed her quietly. She looked at the plastic badges on the hood, then at Darlene, then at Marissa's car, still sitting crooked in our driveway. Who designed this program? She asked. Darlene started with the board. Captain Bennett stopped her. Who gave the instruction tonight? Darlene's mouth opened, and for a second all you could hear was rain dripping from the maples and the broken porch light buzzing behind me. Finally, she said, I did. Captain Bennett nodded once. Then we will need your emails, contracts, invoices, and all communications with these individuals. That was when Glenn turned his head toward Darlene, and I saw the first crack between them. He had thought she gave him power. Now he understood she had handed him liability. I looked at the echo patch in the garage, at the porch light still flickering, at Marissa standing under real protection, and I knew the fight had shifted. It was no longer 3 men in a driveway. It was paper, cameras, witnesses, and a community realizing the badges had always been plastic. By the next morning, the rain had passed, but Cedar Hollow did not feel clean. The street looked normal from a distance. Wet lawns, recycling bins, pine needles stuck to curbs, porch lights fading in the gray sunrise, but every house seemed to be holding its breath. Marissa sat at our kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug of tea she had not touched. Her blue hospital keychain lay beside it, scratched, damp, and ordinary in a way that made my chest tighten every time I looked at it. I had finally fixed the porch light around 2 in the morning because I needed to do something with my hands that did not involve replaying Glenn Porter's voice. Now it glowed steady through the front window, yellow and warm, lighting the exact stretch of driveway where Darlene's fake authority had fallen apart. At 8:15, attorney Claire Donovan called. Claire had handled a property disclosure problem for one of my old teammates years earlier, and she spoke with the careful calm of someone who knew the difference between anger and strategy. Do not post anything, she said. Do not argue in the neighborhood group. Preserve every message, every video, every notice, every envelope. We are going to make the record stronger than their story. By 10, Noah Briggs had sent the doorbell footage in 3 formats. Mrs. Alvarez forwarded 2 fake inspection notices and a receipt for a cash processing charge she had paid because the Black Polo team told her late payment would affect her title paperwork. Kevin Miller sent photographs of his brother's truck being blocked near the visitor lot, along with a fine labeled security non-cooperation. By noon, my inbox looked like a map of fear. Cedar Hollow had not been protected. It had been trained. Captain Laura Bennett called Marissa that afternoon and asked if she would give a formal statement at the station. I drove her there, but she insisted on walking in by herself. That was Marissa. She had been scared, yes, and nobody had the right to make her feel that way at the edge of her own home. But she was not fragile. She told the truth in clean, steady sentences. She described the badges, the demand for her keys, the way Glenn used the word officer, the moment she asked for real police, and the way Darlene arrived acting like the driveway belonged to her. When Captain Bennett asked whether anyone from Cedar Hollow knew her work schedule, Marissa looked at me, and the room seemed to get smaller. 2 weeks earlier, Darlene had sent a notice demanding that all residents update their vehicle and emergency contact information for the new safety program. Marissa had listed her shift pattern because the form said it was voluntary, but strongly encouraged. Claire requested a copy of that form the same day. The answer came faster than any of us expected. Glenn Porter's contract described his team as notice delivery support, not security, not officers, not enforcement. The invoices, however, told a different story. One line read, evening driveway compliance visit. Another read, repeat household pressure contact. Then Claire found the email that changed everything. Darlene had written to Glenn, the nurse returns after 7. Her husband is the military one. Make sure she understands we can act before he intervenes. I read that sentence 3 times while the repaired porch light hummed above us. Marissa stared at the printed page, then put one hand over the blue keychain. She knew I would be alone, she said. I nodded, but I did not say what I felt, because feelings were not what would finish this. The email had a timestamp, a sender, a recipient, and a plan. Darlene had not lost control of a policy. She had aimed it at my wife. By the next morning, the rain had passed, but Cedar Hollow did not feel clean. The street looked normal from a distance. Wet lawns, recycling bins, pine needles stuck to curbs, porch lights fading in the gray sunrise, but every house seemed to be holding its breath. Marissa sat at our kitchen table with both hands wrapped around a mug of tea she had not touched. Her blue hospital keychain lay beside it, scratched, damp, and ordinary in a way that made my chest tighten every time I looked at it. I had finally fixed the porch light around 2 in the morning because I needed to do something with my hands that did not involve replaying Glenn Porter's voice. Now it glowed steady through the front window, yellow and warm, lighting the exact stretch of driveway where Darlene's fake authority had fallen apart. At 8:15, attorney Claire Donovan called. Claire had handled a property disclosure problem for one of my old teammates years earlier, and she spoke with the careful calm of someone who knew the difference between anger and strategy. Do not post anything, she said. Do not argue in the neighborhood group. Preserve every message, every video, every notice, every envelope. We are going to make the record stronger than their story. By 10, Noah Briggs had sent the doorbell footage in 3 formats. Mrs. Alvarez forwarded 2 fake inspection notices and a receipt for a cash processing charge she had paid because the Black Polo team told her late payment would affect her title paperwork. Kevin Miller sent photographs of his brother's truck being blocked near the visitor lot, along with a fine labeled security non-cooperation. By noon, my inbox looked like a map of fear. Cedar Hollow had not been protected. It had been trained. Captain Laura Bennett called Marissa that afternoon and asked if she would give a formal statement at the station. I drove her there, but she insisted on walking in by herself. That was Marissa. She had been scared, yes, and nobody had the right to make her feel that way at the edge of her own home, but she was not fragile. She told the truth in clean, steady sentences. She described the badges, the demand for her keys, the way Glenn used the word officer, the moment she asked for real police, and the way Darlene arrived acting like the driveway belonged to her. When Captain Bennett asked whether anyone from Cedar Hollow knew her work schedule, Marissa looked at me, and the room seemed to get smaller. 2 weeks earlier, Darlene had sent a notice demanding that all residents update their vehicle and emergency contact information for the new safety program. Marissa had listed her shift pattern because the form said it was voluntary, but strongly encouraged. Claire requested a copy of that form the same day. The answer came faster than any of us expected. Glenn Porter's contract described his team as notice delivery support, not security, not officers, not enforcement. The invoices, however, told a different story. One line read, evening driveway compliance visit. Another read, repeat household pressure contact. Then Claire found the email that changed everything. Darlene had written to Glenn, the nurse returns after 7. Her husband is the military one. Make sure she understands we can act before he intervenes. I read that sentence 3 times while the repaired porch light hummed above us. Marissa stared at the printed page, then put one hand over the blue keychain. She knew I would be alone, she said. I nodded, but I did not say what I felt, because feelings were not what would finish this. The email had a timestamp, a sender, a recipient, and a plan. Darlene had not lost control of a policy. She had aimed it at my wife. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 7. But by 6:30, the Cedar Hollow clubhouse was already full enough that people were standing along the walls with folded arms and unanswered notices in their hands. The room smelled like carpet cleaner, coffee, rain-damp jackets, and the kind of nervous silence that comes when neighbors realize they have all been afraid separately for too long. Marissa sat beside me in the second row, her blue hospital keychain looped around her finger, not hidden, not displayed, just there. Claire Donovan stood near the front with a slim folder, a flash drive, and the calm expression of someone who had brought facts instead of volume. Darlene sat at the board table beneath a framed watercolor of Cedar Hollow's entrance, wearing a cream blazer and the same community smile she had used for years to turn complaints into inconveniences. Glenn Porter was not there. Captain Bennett had already interviewed him, and according to Claire, he had started explaining himself the moment he understood Darlene's emails were not loyalty papers. They were evidence. The temporary board secretary opened the meeting by saying everyone should remain civil. Mrs. Alvarez answered from the back. Civil is what we were before she sent people to our doors. No one laughed, but half the room nodded. Darlene tapped her microphone and said the compliance response team had been created to support safety and preserve property values. Claire stood before she could continue. Then we should begin with what the team was actually authorized to do. She projected the contract on the wall. The words were plain: notice delivery, parking documentation, resident communication support. Nothing about stopping cars. Nothing about demanding keys. Nothing about blocking a private driveway. Then Claire projected Glenn's invoices. Evening driveway compliance visit. Repeat household pressure contact. After-hours response. Processing fee collection. The room shifted with every line. Paper rustled. Someone whispered, "They charged us for that." Darlene folded her hands tighter. Those descriptions were vendor language. Claire clicked once more, and Darlene's email appeared on the screen. The nurse returns after 7. Her husband is the military one. Make sure she understands we can act before he intervenes. The clubhouse went so quiet I could hear the air conditioner click on above the ceiling tiles. Marissa did not look away from the screen. I watched Darlene instead. Her smile did not vanish all at once. It drained slowly, like light leaving a room. A man from Sycamore Court stood up holding a yellow notice. You told me that team could affect my title if I did not pay. A young mother near the aisle said they photographed her babysitter's car and charged a security review fee. Mrs. Alvarez held up her receipt with trembling hands and said she paid cash because Glenn told her late fees would double by morning. Claire let them speak. One by one, Cedar Hollow rebuilt the pattern out loud. Fake authority, soft threats, plastic badges, invented fees, late-night visits, and a board president who had learned that fear was cheaper than consent. Darlene tried to interrupt when Noah's doorbell footage played, showing Marissa's car blocked in our driveway and Glenn using the word officer. Captain Bennett, standing near the back wall in plain clothes, stepped forward just enough for everyone to see her. Let it play, she said. Darlene sat down. That was the first time I had ever seen her obey someone without trying to rename it cooperation. When the video ended, Claire turned to the board members. You have a choice tonight. You can continue calling this a misunderstanding, or you can stop the program, preserve all records, refund every improper fee, and cooperate with the investigation. The board treasurer, a quiet man named Paul Hendricks, removed his glasses and looked at Darlene as if he had never seen her clearly before. Did you approve that email? He asked. Darlene's mouth opened, but no polished answer came out. Outside, through the clubhouse windows, the streetlights glowed over wet pavement, and somewhere down the road our repaired porch light was shining steadily over an empty driveway. I did not feel victory yet. Victory was too loud a word for that room. What I felt was alignment, the slow click of truth finding the place where it belonged. The fake badges were gone. The cameras had spoken. The neighbors were standing up. And Darlene Whitaker, who had spent years turning rules into weapons without ever wearing a real badge, was finally surrounded by something she could not find, intimidate, or rewrite: witnesses. The board voted that night before anyone had a chance to hide behind another committee. The compliance response team was suspended immediately. Every badge and shirt was collected as evidence, and Darlene Whitaker was placed on emergency leave while Cedar Hollow turned over contracts, invoices, emails, payment records, and homeowner complaints to Captain Bennett. She tried to resign quietly 2 days later, sending a message about protecting community harmony and stepping away from negativity. But Claire made sure the official minutes used clearer words: removed for misuse of association authority and failure to disclose unauthorized enforcement practices. There is a difference between leaving a room and being shown the door. Glenn Porter and his 2 men faced investigation for impersonation-related conduct, unlawful detention concerns, and deceptive collection practices, and for the first time, the words officer and enforcement disappeared from Cedar Hollow paper unless real law backed them up. The refunds took longer. Fear always pays quickly, but justice has to count receipts. Mrs. Alvarez got back every dollar from her fake inspection fee. Kevin Miller got his parking penalty reversed. The young mother from Sycamore Court received a written apology for the babysitter incident. By the end of the audit, more than 40 households had some fine, fee, or notice corrected. The Homeowners Association had to mail a new policy in plain language. No private individual could stop a vehicle, demand keys, request entry, inspect a bag, block a driveway, or imply police authority. Every future complaint had to go through documented notice, appeal rights, and, when needed, actual law enforcement. It was boring, legal, and beautiful. Marissa went back to work the following Monday. I watched her leave before sunrise, coffee in one hand, hospital bag over her shoulder, blue keychain swinging from her fingers. She paused at the driver's door longer than she used to, and I hated that Darlene had put that hesitation into our driveway. But then Marissa looked back at the porch light, steady and warm above the steps, and gave me a small smile. Not the old smile yet. A real one, though. That mattered more. A week later, Noah helped me install a small sign near the split-rail fence by the entrance to our drive. It did not shout. It did not threaten. It simply said, "No private enforcement beyond this point." Marissa stood beside me while I tightened the last screw, and the evening smelled like wet pine again, clean this time, without fear underneath it. The echo patch stayed in the garage drawer. I did not need to frame it, explain it, or wear it like a warning. The people who needed to know had learned exactly enough. Darlene had thought authority was a costume, a polo shirt, a plastic badge, a stern voice, a late-night visit, a folder full of invented rules. She never understood that real authority leaves a record, answers questions, respects boundaries, and protects the person who is scared instead of using fear against them. That night, when Marissa came home, no one blocked the driveway. Her headlights moved slowly between the maples, touched the repaired porch light, and settled on the front steps like the house was breathing again. She parked, picked up her blue keychain, and walked inside without calling me from the car. I stood on the porch until the door closed behind her, listening to the quiet. Justice did not arrive loud in Cedar Hollow. It arrived on video, in meeting minutes, in refunded checks, in real statements, in a steady porch light, and in a driveway that finally belonged to the people who lived at the end of it.